All right, awesome. All right, so so I'm finally getting Streamlabs and LinkedIn to play nicely, and so yeah, Sean, we got 7 people tuning in over at LinkedIn. So anyone that's watching on LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube, anywhere else, feel free to use the text chat to ask any questions, share resources, or contribute to the conversation in any way you wish. I will keep an eye on all the text chats and relay all of that information over to Brett so he can engage with you. Yeah, Brett, how about you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Gary. I'm Brett Lippel. I am currently the Chief Partner Officer and SVP of Sales for Ship Your Car Now. My earlier career started with Enterprise Rent-A-Car right out of college. Ended up opening their European operations. Lived in Canada for 5 years and opened up Europe. Lived in Bath, England for 5 years, and after that, moved back to the U.S., where I was one of the founding members of TrueCar, and we built that up to from scratch to over 8,000 dealers, and obviously they're public now. Ran a company called Midway Auto Group, which we took over during the pandemic, and it was losing money. We turned it around to making about 15 million, and had a successful exit over 100 million. Also had a startup for 4 years called College Concierge, which helped international kids get adjusted to life here in the U.S. By buying them cars, finding them housing, insurance, you name it. We helped them, and I was able to sell that right before the pandemic for a little bit more than I put into it. So that was a good exit, and so happy to be here today, Gary.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining us, especially with the immense level of experience and accolades that you've been able to accumulate in your career. And I'm curious. So we got a lot of founders, or I should say, uh, entrepreneurs, people that want to be entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are coming from corporate labor force backgrounds. Sounds like you kind of had a similar beginning to your entrepreneurial journey. I'm curious, when you first started out going from employee to entrepreneur, what were some of the biggest surprises that you encountered? What were some of the things that you had some expectations for, but you didn't really understand the scope or the the dynamics involved with those things until you were actually experiencing them?
Sure. Yeah, I would tell you that the money situation was probably the most uh, interesting. You go from working at a corporate company to writing checks out of your own checking account to support your startup, and you look at things a different way when it's coming out of your checkbook. Um, the other thing, raising money seems very easy. You see it all the time on the news. Um, and I think that was the hardest thing is you focus on starting up a business, getting customers, hiring people, and trying to raise money at the same time is very difficult. I think people get used to Shark Tank and they see some of these big businesses. I still love to quote Amazon. Um, they were a 10-year overnight success. So it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time, and it is a 24/7 operation. I do compare it a little bit to running a franchise. There's I did a lot of research on the franchise system, and a lot of people buy franchises because they don't think they need to work. And in fact, when you do buy a franchise, you have to sorry, you have to work harder than ever before. So um, franchises, it doesn't really start to pay until you have 3 or 4 franchises open. But you have some friends that bought a franchise and said, I'm going to hire somebody to run it, and I'm just going to sit back and make money. But that is not the case. A franchise or a startup, you're working harder than you ever have, and you're working 24/7. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that you brought that up, especially the franchise uh, connection too, because yeah, there are a lot of again entrepreneurs that instead of coming up with their own idea, a lot of them they struggle to come up with an idea that they think is a good idea, that they can build a product in the market and turn into a sustainable, scalable company. And yeah, a lot of these things are just inexperience, right? Inexperience with
Right.
all these different elements that are involved in entrepreneurship. And so, yeah, many of them look for an existing business that they can buy, either
Mm.
one that, is listed on some, for sale listing service, or they look for a franchise, right? Because they're both kind of
Right.
similar, like, oh, it's kind of an established thing already. But
Yeah.
yeah, what you kind of touched on was the reality of having to work hard and not being hands off. And I'd
Yeah.
love to hear, your take on that. Why is that? Why is it so difficult for a person to come into an established business or buy a franchise and just hand it off and sit back and do nothing? Like, what actual elements in the operations or product or other elements of a business
Sure.
get in the way of that?
Yeah, obviously the biggest thing is it's your money, and nobody's going to treat your money like you will. And it's your baby, and some of these franchises, you're spending 2 or 300,000 just to get started in that, and nobody's gonna care as much as you would. And you could really look for good people, and you can hire some good people, but at the end of the day, they're not owners. And that's the biggest thing that I find is um, in these franchises and in the startups that nobody's going to take it. Nobody's going to do what you can do for the company. And I think to get into that mindset, you have to understand even a franchise, it's 24/7. It is hard work to get these businesses, even if it's an existing business, to get the trust. If you're taking over an existing business, get the trust of the current people, to get the trust of the clientele, and to learn the business.
I'm also curious in regards to getting up to speed with the business, right?
Mhm.
Like, if someone buys a business or buys a franchise, when you're, looking to delegate, you're looking to empower your team members, your staff,
Yep.
your employees. How much more difficult is that when you don't fully understand the market, the product, the customers, the operations that are happening, the workflows that
Yeah.
exist? Like, how difficult is it for a new owner to assess what's going on and actually make improvements?
Yeah, I have a little different spin on that. Most franchisors will give you the tools to manage everything. The good ones, you can manage everything from your cost of goods sold to your employees. Um, I am. I would say the reason I'm a little different is I would invest more time in getting to know the people. And if you hire the people that bring on the people, or go through the people and keep those on that you trust, they're going to be your subject matter experts. You take over a business that somebody's been there 5 years, you're never going to know as much as they will. And But you have to bond with them. You have to build that relationship and that trust, and to let them do what they've been doing successful, and to also hold them accountable. So, I'm very into hiring good people around you and letting them run the business. But you're very much you have to be very visible. That's the other thing as an owner. And You have to be approachable, and you have to be able to answer the phone if there's questions. And sometimes you don't have to have all the answers as an owner, especially if you take over. When I took over Midway Auto Group, I was 49 years. The company had been around 49 years. There's no way I learned in 3 years what some people knew in 30. But I relied on them to make the decisions. And then we built a lot of, we didn't have a lot of reporting, but we built a lot of reporting to hold them accountable.
I like that there's a common theme here in regards to building trust and giving
Yeah.
that trust to them. You know, a lot of times founders, business owners, operators at any stage, they can either overlook or disregard what goes into building a positive, healthy, productive culture for their business. And the trust element goes such a huge way. And what you're also saying in regards to being a visible leader, a an engaged leader that they can come to. And again, trust is so important.
Yep.
You've touched on a little bit of those elements, but how does that differ when you're an early stage company that's, getting established in the market and maybe just getting past that milestone of product market fit and looking to raise serious money to scale versus being a much later stage company that has hundreds, if not thousands, of employees? Like, what are some
Sure.
common best practices in regards to making sure you're still addressing that element of being a good leader and establishing that healthy culture of trust?
Yeah, I would say that starting off with a long-term picture and trying to set those expectations for the long term. A lot of startups that I see, they're in incubators, they're at somebody's house, they're in a garage. You show up, trying to set some guidelines sooner really rules for the business sooner the better. And that goes from everything from when to show up, what time you're working, what are you responsible for, and so forth. I believe in having weekly and 30, 60, 90-day meetings, but not having them too long. And there's a lot of work to be done for startups. One of the biggest things I tell people that join a startup is you got to find work. You got to make yourself busy. If you join a startup and you sit there and wait for someone to hand you work, it's just not going to happen. And you might work on this, but everybody really is mini CEOs in a brand new startup, and they have to look at it that way. And the flip side is sometimes you get what you pay for too. Some of these people are not making money, or you're paying them equity only. But you have to really make sure that all the goals are aligned, and that you are constantly communicating with your team.
Early stage companies, startups, especially like these tech startups that
Mhm.
are reading like TechCrunch and other sorts of forums and publications like that, they're often being pushed the idea of avoiding documentation. Just work, just do stuff. But
Yeah.
in my experience, talking to lots of different mentors and founders and investors, and my own experience being a founder, co-founder, documentation serves an incredible purpose, and it's an invaluable tool to do a lot of what you're talking about in regards to making sure everyone's on the same page and know what their
Mhm.
responsibilities are and can keep themselves accountable to their role. And that goes for
Right.
the founder, co-founders, and any employee or anyone else, an advisor or even an investor. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, again, in your own experience with these different stage companies, both as an employee and as a entrepreneur, business owner, founder, a leader, where do you think that sweet spot is in regards to documentation and
Yeah.
just working, just getting your head down and just doing stuff?
Yeah. You almost can't over document. I- if you manage through data, it's a lot easier. A lot of people that I've seen that have started startups or joined a startup, they started for a couple reasons. They all want to make the big money. They all want to be in the Amazon or the Googles, but they also, in a weird way, want or think they could carve out their own job, right? So, a funny story about TrueCar. After about 3 months, we had our big client in. Our first client was Capital One, and we had our big client in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we realized that no employees were in at 8, that they were all coming in at 9, 10, 11. You have to start off by understanding that to grow, you're going to have that discipline. And the good companies that grow do have that discipline. And to get discipline, you're going to have to manage it by data. And you can get data as early as day one. When does everybody come in? What I see is I see these startups that are very casual, and then they go, eventually you're going to have to get more corporate. And the later, the harder it is. The sooner you can start thinking about growing, and are we going to be at 200 people, 300 people? Um, But yeah, documentation and data is the key to anything in management, even in big companies. It's really hard to question data. When you ask somebody, what are you working on? A lot. Well, what does a lot mean? What did you accomplish? My one of my mentors used to not ask what you did today, but he used to ask, "What you accomplish today?" And if you ask that, that's a whole different way of doing things. And again, it's not Big Brother. It's you have to manage evenly, fairly across the board, and you need to make sure that the biggest thing for startups is money and resources, and you can't be wasting them. And if somebody, like I said it earlier, if somebody's kind of sitting around waiting for somebody to hand them a project, you're paying them. And you really need to make sure that everybody's working and they're working hard, and that um, and that goals are being met. And there's a lot of good books out there that can help you really manage from day one. Traction is a great book to use. I'm a big pro into traction. And even though it talks about existing companies, you have to look at a startup as an existing company. Um, and you have to start building those meetings and that accountability into the process.
Yeah, I love that you brought up traction. It's a yeah, definitely a favorite of mine in the community for sure. And it's one
Yeah,
of those books that does a wonderful job of explaining methodology and giving you the tools to appropriately contextualize how to utilize that methodology and tweak it to fit whatever your unique situation is for your business. So
sure.
wonderful, wonderful tool. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think the website's Traction the book, or just Google Traction book, and it should come up if anyone out there is interested. Um, Going back to fundraising,
Yeah.
how beneficial was it to treat your startup business as a
Yeah.
legit business going into it, to establish some of these you know more sound business practices from the beginning, so it wasn't as much of a ordeal to change those behaviors? And how were you able to leverage that with investors to fundraise?
Sure. Yeah. My career's been interesting in fundraising. When I opened up Enterprise Rent a Car, even though it was a startup operation, we had the corporate financing behind us. When I joined TrueCar, Scott Painter, who was the CEO and founder, um, he did all the fundraising. And then when I had my own startup, obviously I was in charge of the fundraising. Um, it's interesting in mentoring a lot of startups. And sometimes you hear, we're not going to raise money. We're not going to need money. We're going to do all this on our own. I haven't really seen too many companies that can grow or do that without getting some sort of investment, whether it's family, friends and family, or angel investors. So really, in a startup, you have to start thinking about that, raising money day one. First of all, the second thing is network. Talk to as many people as you can. Join organizations, accelerators. There's all kinds of people that have that audience. And then the third thing is have a tough skin. When you're raising money, um, uh, it's very, very tough. You'll wine and dine somebody, and then they won't commit after 3 meals and 5 steaks. And then other people will. So you just have to broaden your network, and you want to be very careful at raising money. And there's a lot of good people that can help you. You don't want to raise too much, and you don't want to raise too little. But you always need to keep an eye on that. I was consulting with a startup, and they were doing a lot of stuff, and the CEO would get into the weeds, but he wouldn't go out and really raise money, and they ran out of money. That's the one thing that kills all startups is the running out of money. So it is a that there's two 24/7 jobs. You're running a business while you're also looking to raise money. But being passionate and talking to people and being passionate about what you're doing, a lot of times they're investing in you, and they want to know that you are going to work 24/7. I love on Shark Tank. Their favorite singers, are you gonna eat ramen? If we give you 300,000 for the next 2 years, we don't want you taking 200,000 of it as pay. We really want you, and everything you do in this. There's very few startups that get that kind of money where they don't have to bootstrap. And even if you do, you got to think of the investor's money as it is your own money. So
I'm curious since yeah, it's come up a couple times. Shark Tank. What are some of the gems, like you just kind of mentioned one, but what are some of the gems that people can take away from watching Shark Tank, and what are some like the worst kind of takeaways they can stumble upon while watching Shark Tank,
yeah,
good and bad?
I went to a seminar for a couple of guys, actually here in Agora, that were on Shark Tank and got some money. You don't see the whole part of it. What you're seeing is the entertainment value. And what Shark Tank does is you're literally waiting around for days in the green room, and then they go, okay, you're on in an hour, and then you're out there pitching it. The biggest thing I think you could take from Shark Tank is I think they really invest in the people more, almost more than the idea. They're looking, is this somebody that can take it to the next level? Is this somebody that's passionate? Is this somebody that believes in what they're doing? Um, and I think they spend a lot of time on the valuation of the company and how much, and I think that's for entertainment purposes. Don't forget on Shark Tank, you're looking at 15 minutes, and they're usually in there for 4 or 5 hours, and then even after that, there's due diligence, and even after that, they end up, I think, only investing in about 60% of the companies that they agreed to. So you can't live your life by Shark Tank, but if I would say there's one thing, is see how passionate some of these founders are and how much it comes through, and how much they had this idea and they thought this idea, and they want to bring it to market, and they're going to do everything, and um, they're investing more in people mostly than anything else on Shark Tank.
Yeah, I like that you brought up listening to their passion because it's when you think about pitching, think about fundraising,
Yep.
it's about telling a persuasive story, right? And
Yeah.
that passion goes a long way to get the audience emotionally invested in what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing this thing. Um,
Yep.
I'm curious, when it comes to fundraising to pitching, and this could go for sales or investors, or even like trying to bring on a co-founder or a really high profile first employee, first hire.
Yep.
What are some other elements in addition to passion that are extremely effective in creating that persuasive story with your pitch?
Yeah. I think it's not it's also, why are you doing this? Why or at any age are you doing a startup? And I think that the other thing that a lot of investors like is they like to see if you failed. Um, and that's the first question sometimes you get when you're raising money: have you failed? And to a brand new startup, that's a little weird kind of question. But a lot of these guys want to know, um, what'd you learn from that mistake? So I would say, be honest, be upfront. Obviously, you don't want to go there and go, "Hey, I want to be the next billionaire, and I want to be the next unicorn." Um, it really is so rare, but we see the news all the time of these companies that are unicorns, but we don't see the news all the time of these startups that are just doing okay. Or, every business out there is a startup, whether it's a yoga studio or it's a technology play platform there's a lot of opportunity. So again, getting back to passion, why you're doing this, um, uh, and you know, are you going to see this out, right? If someone's going to invest money, if I was going to invest money, and now I'm on the other side of it, I want to know that somebody's going to see this out, not try it for 2 years and then move on. So
Yeah, and that too, again, is where the passion really kind of does a lot of heavy lifting during like
yeah,
a pitch or presentation, or just building relationships with
sure,
these people around you in your community that may lead into wonderful opportunities for someone to be your investor or co-founder or something else. And in the question of have you failed before and listening to what you learned, again, doing this for a long time, what ends up being demonstrated through that question and response is an understanding of your methodology to
Yeah.
approach adversity, learn from the challenges that you faced, and another way it could be put is aptitude. They're trying to
Mhm.
assess your aptitude with
Yeah.
your ability as a founder, as a leader, right? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I really again appreciate these wonderful insights. Let's see, checking on chat. Josh, nice to have you joining us on YouTube. Again, you can use the chat to ask any questions. I posted Brett's LinkedIn so you can get a better understanding of his background. Um, Same thing for those in LinkedIn that are watching. Use the chat. Feel free. Otherwise, yeah, I'll keep picking your brain, Brett, until we get some others chiming in. But I'm glad that we got a fun audience tuning in. Um, yeah. So let's I guess focus a little bit later stage. So you've done some, again, expansion into different markets.
Yeah.
I see a lot of early stage founders. Actually, I was talking to one 2 days ago because again, I joined Founders Boost, working with
Yeah.
their accelerator program in Glendale, and a younger startup founder reached out to me asking me about a program, and they
Mhm.
happen to be in Europe and they want to enter the U.S. market.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, kind of again, challenge to go from one market to another, especially in different countries.
Correct.
I since you've got real experience and again,
Yeah.
wonderful accolades here. I love to hear, your again, kind of insights on the challenges involved there. What founders of any stage should be aware of when you're trying to enter a different market, especially again when it's not just different cities, but completely different countries. Like what are some like the best practices to be aware of and address?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we learned that a little bit the hard way. You know, when we opened up Canada and Europe, there wasn't the internet as strong as it was now, and you didn't have like the ability to communicate. Um, the biggest thing I would say is you got to know the culture. If you're going to start a business from Europe into the US or from the US into Europe, you have to be boots on the ground. You have to physically be there. Culture is a huge thing everywhere from the way people answer the phones to how they talk. When we were hiring people in Europe, they would get 6 week vacation from day one. So, in America, if someone asks on an interview, how much vacation do I get? We tend to get a little, well, wait a second. In Europe, that's the first question they ask. I get in, so that is a culture. Canada is a little different as well. In and don't just think because you've made it in one country that you're going to make it it is a startup. You are starting from scratch. I would suggest before you go into another international market, you do as much research as you can. You get boots on the ground, and if you can live there, all the better. I get approached all the time from companies in Europe or Australia that want to start a company here, but think they can do it, with the internet. And hey, we're going to do this technology, and we're going to create the SaaS product for the automotive companies or insurance or something like that, and they're not here. And there's so many different nuances in different countries that you really need to do that, because something as simple as vacation could set you back, right? In certain European countries, August is a really slow month because everybody's on vacation. I would say the culture is the number one thing to really learn and absorb. And if you do live in another country, um, get into the culture. My wife and I were very much into Canada. I didn't get any better at hockey in Canada when I lived there, but Europe too. We lived. A lot of people come here, and a lot of Americans go, and you go in, you get your three-year visa, and you meet your neighbors, and that's it. We got into the community, we did charity work. Um, you have to live like, in another country. You have to look at it like I'm going to be here the rest of my life, and then you're going to see all kinds of opportunities come up. And there was obviously American groups that would stick together in Europe and in England, and we didn't join those. We literally got into the local communities, the local economies, and so forth. And I think that was invaluable to our growth.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said, and it is so important to really live authentically as you can in those communities, because it's like you pointed out, there's so many little nuances, and
Yeah,
there's these little differences at every level of existence, from government, like you're saying, government regulations or protections, to the way that people answer the phone, right? And looking at how these businesses and the different stakeholders within the larger ecosystem of that market, that industry, all behave and interact is going to be eye opening to not just, like you said, like identify opportunities for
sure.
innovation, to ideally create a more enjoyable experience for the people that you're trying to serve, and provide them with more benefits or easier access to those benefits, and thus more value. But
Yeah,
it's also going to help, again, identify all of these huge traps, or potential hurdles that you have to learn how to overcome within the
sure.
context of that culture, and those other mechanisms, whether that's logistics, or again, just how you say hi to someone, right? So yeah, it's so important, so good to hear from you, and your own experience of, yeah, avoiding those kind of safe places that feel familiar by joining up with other Americans that are
Yeah,
living abroad, and instead just bypassing that and being
sure.
completely ingrained in the culture around you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I chuckle because in England they don't they make fun of us for saying "Have a nice day," right? And it's just not something that they say. And every time you say "Have a good day," they would kind of laugh and say, "Oh, you Americans say that all the time." So, little things like that. You really, it's when you're in a different country, it's their country. And I've seen where companies have failed because they want to Americanize, other countries. They want to go in and say, "Hey, we're number one in America, so we can do this and easily in Europe or Canada or Mexico um, or anywhere." But you can't go in like that. Remember, they have their own products and companies, and some of the times you're going to be going up against somebody that's been ingrained in their community for many years, and that's born and raised there. It was one of the I think one of the problems that I had when I started College Concierge, is we were dealing with international students, and as much as I hired them, there was a lot of things that I didn't know. The Chinese market was our biggest market. They're about 60% of the international kids that came here. And we started College Concierge to save international students money, to save them from not really getting ripped off, for cars or insurance. I mean, you can imagine, if they go into one of our car dealerships, what they're going to pay. What we found is, and this was something that we had to quickly get over, is some of them didn't had so much money, it didn't matter if they pay whatever it is when they go in and buy a Ferrari. So that was a big cultural piece that I learned the hard way, and we were able to adjust for that.
Yeah, and this also touches back on what we were talking about earlier, and we were explaining in regards to a entrepreneur buying a franchise, or buying an existing business. There's again so many lessons that you don't know until you're actually living and breathing that business, and interacting with the people around you, and listening to, with trust, your team members, your staff, your employees, or other people that you have around you, whether those mentors or advisors or investors, right? Um, so yeah, there's such an important takeaway in regards to not getting ahead of yourself, and being aware of you know how people are interacting,
Yeah,
what feedback you're getting, and like building on that, what suggestions you have to actively seek out that useful data, that useful feedback, or suggestions, advice that you can get from different types of stakeholders that you've established an ecosystem around.
sure. Sure. I would. The first thing I would tell everybody is you have to network, whether it's for fundraising. The more people you know, and tell everybody what you do. I love to network. I'm in a bunch of networking groups, and I remember once that I was referred to a lawyer that I already knew. I just didn't know what law he practiced, and our kids. He was a neighbor, and imagine living, down the street from somebody that you've seen, and you knew he was a lawyer, but I didn't know that he was an employment law. The other thing I was going to say, Garen, I was thinking about this, and I get this a lot, and I think I don't really see it on on some of the presentations, but if you're doing a startup to be your own boss, or you're buying a franchise to be your own boss, that is not the right reason to do it. It is very hard. The only way to do it is to start a business and never get investors. The minute you get investors, you're bringing somebody else that's going to have a say. Franchisees, notoriously, the franchisor comes in and says, you need to buy from this vendor, and you need to paint the walls this, and you need to park your cars here. It's I think it to some investors, I think that is not what they're looking for when someone says, I want to be my own boss. Now, some investors are more active than others, but there was a famous company I looked at years ago, and a bunch of guys started their own business, and they had a basketball court in the middle of the floor, and they had a great restaurant, and they were all in flip flops and hoodies. And now they sold to a huge company, and they're wearing suit and ties every day. And some of the people didn't last, but if you're going to grow, you're gonna need investors, and that means you're going to have boards, and you're going to have more people that have say in what happens in the business.
Yeah, I think that's really important too to call attention to, because yeah, it's a common thing. Looking in these communities, people I interact with, again, they're coming from the labor force, and they're sick of different elements involved in that, and a lot of them very justifiably. Others, they just kind of get spun up in different ideas, but at the end of the day, they want to be their own boss, they want to have that control. But as you said, it's incredibly difficult, and depending on the type of business that you are able to cultivate and
Yeah.
grow, at some point you got to be aware of, like, how different, again, stakeholders that come into your business
Yeah.
may have say, and may have, take some control away from you. But even getting to that point, it's incredibly difficult to reach. And the other thing that I see with a lot of these people is they often don't approach it in a healthy manner, where, again, there's a balance. There should be a balance in regards to
Yeah.
obsessively working all the time just to work, versus working strategically while making some time for, your own health, your family, some
Sure.
some priorities that everyone should
Yeah.
have, but at the same time still being fully cognizant and prioritizing the fact that this business relies on you, right? But these people,
Yeah.
yeah, they just behave so obsessively, and they get caught up in a lot of grifters online that
Mhm.
try to justify this notion of making every single sacrifice you can in order to be successful, without understanding how those sacrifices actually pay off
Yeah.
and what they lead to. So there's just like so much of this, and yeah, like a person that wants to be their own boss, that is buying into that sort of notion of sacrificing everything, working all the time, not
Yeah.
sleeping, it's still not going to guarantee that they get anywhere. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, if they focus on building a career and learning how to apply entrepreneurship to themselves to build a personal brand, build the relationships with employers and their,
Yeah.
bosses and stuff, it's almost always going to be an easier path to that sort of financial success and freedom in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
there's, yeah, it's a lot of fun, interesting elements here. And I've got uh Sultan of Awesome over on Twitch, who's curious about what's TrueCar. I think it'd be really interesting to hear, uh, from your own mouth, what TrueCar was when it started, and
Yeah.
what it evolved to when you exited, and you know,
Sure.
whatever little kind of fun highlights you can drop in there, whether it's a challenge that you overcame or something again that you were surprised by as part of that journey, that would be wonderful takeaways for the community to learn from.
Yeah. Before I get into that, I do want to say, being your own boss, I mean, to a huge extent, you are, but you have to go into these startups understanding that there are going to be, whether it's a bank or there's, you can limit what's going on. But for instance, joining a franchise, I would do the due diligence and see, how much say does the franchisor have, right? I mean, you're going to be your own boss as to hours and who for 90%, can you handle that other 10%? And the other thing is, you probably know, Gary, but everybody's, when you go to these fundraisers, everybody wants the angel investor that's going to give them 10 million bucks and not say a word and, show up to meetings every 3 months. Um, uh, you know, Raising money, it's very tough, and you can't be picky. It's hard to be picky as to who raises, who gives you money. And then still sometimes you don't know, right, if how much they're going to be invested in the company. So anyway, TrueCar, when we started TrueCar back in the day, people weren't really buying cars online. They really weren't doing a lot of research. And what TrueCar, there was lead gen back in the day, but what TrueCar said is there's a lot of what are called affinity groups, whether it's Consumer Reports or USAA or credit unions or your bank, your church or temple. Those are all affinity groups, and we went to all these affinity groups, and our first customer was Capital One, and then USAA, and we said, okay, you have a very loyal following of customers. We want to help your customers get a car at a good price. And the TrueCar value was, what are people paying in your market for that car, right? And are you paying below market or are you paying above market? Back in the day, right when we started, people were you would send a fax out to 5 different dealers and say, what's the best deal on the car, right? So we kind of did that in-house, where we went and shopped for you and got you a good price for the car. It wasn't always the lowest price, but it was better than average, and it was better than maybe your neighbor was paying for that car. And you got a benefit by being a USAA member, and USAA at the time, and still is, the highest customer service company in America. So we were combining the auto industry, which isn't always known for its customer service, into USAA, and saying, okay, by being a USAA member, we're going to go out and negotiate for you and get you a really good deal on this Camry SE. And it's a deal where you probably couldn't get it on your own. So that's what TrueCar started. And what we would do is we would vet the dealers, and we would send one lead to a dealer. And that dealer would only pay us when they sold a car. So it was a win-win for both. We really kind of played that fine line between being pro dealer and pro consumer, right? So, if you're too much for the consumer and the dealer doesn't make money, or if you're too much for the dealer and the dealer makes too much money. So that was what TrueCar was back in the day. And then they went public, and as when you go public and you have shareholders, there's a different set of rules, and TrueCar became more of a lead provider to say, hey, we're going to get, kind of, when dealers compete, you win, right? Kind of the old fax days where now it's online, and they'll send a bid out, and you'll get 5 different dealers calling you and saying, hey, I saw you were on TrueCar, and I can get you a good deal on this car. So that's kind of what TrueCar became. It's interesting coming from the auto industry. We kind of thought in COVID that everybody would be buying cars online, similar to the Carvana model, and it'd be delivered to your house. And in essence, we did some of that online during COVID, but a lot of dealers have now gone back to, you need to come in, and if you send a lead to a dealer, the first thing when can you come in? It should be, what's it going to take to, what's the price? So the auto industry it's unique. It's changing. It's moving fast. Like I said, the Carvanas of the world and the millennials, they want the car delivered, and everybody is really looking for the kind of the Amazon approach, where and Tesla, nailed it, right? You can go on to Tesla, and I think someone said in 5 minutes and buy a car, and it's delivered to your house. And I think that is going to be the future of the car buying process.
Right on. Appreciate that. Yeah, hopefully that helps. Yeah, Sultan and yeah, also who else? Someone else just joined us. Hang on. Oh, Ada. Yeah. Yeah, thanks for joining us over on chat. If you have any other questions for Brett, let me know. I'll drop his LinkedIn again into the chat so you can get a better idea of Brett's background, which is extensive and impressive. So yeah, um, I'm curious. So we've got a lot of, again, founders that treat their startup as their baby, and they
Mhm.
never intend to exit, sell, anything
Yeah,
like that. They want to just, it's mine, it's my baby. I can't risk it.
yeah,
But in reality, um, a business venture is best treated as an investment, and ideally an investment that you eventually exit from, and you're able to utilize as an entrepreneur to spin up the next best idea or the next great idea you come up with, or maybe the
yeah.
next 100 ideas, depending on how well the exit was and how
Sure.
much credibility and relationship you're able to cultivate from that. I'm curious, was TrueCar ever intended as an exit, or were you guys, from the beginning, like doing the basic, again, documentation, so it was like you guys are ready to go if that became an
Yeah.
option, or was it no, this is our baby, we're just going into it, and we don't ever intend to sell?
Yeah, I think there's two camps. There's the camp that starts a startup hoping they're going to sell, and I get that all the time. And there's the camp that listen, I'm tired of working for somebody, really, and I kind of want to do this. And if I'm making good money and the franchisor is not breathing down my neck or the investors aren't, we can make a very good living. No, TrueCar was when we started. There was always that intention to go public from day one. So, and that was an exciting time to do that, and it was something, to see something where nobody knew what TrueCar was to now a lot of people in LA do. We're on the side of the 405,
Spend a lot of
and
traffic or a lot of time in traffic staring at that sign, so yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's probably the best sign in LA. But yeah, I mean, we intended to go public when we started, but you're right. There are some people. I would just say, keep you always want to keep an open mind. You never know. You never know. I would talk to a lot of people. I see a lot of owners. Sometimes they go through and they want to see what the company's worth, just to see what it's worth. Um, but if you're passionate about what you do, um, and you're making a lot of money, I would say keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, don't break what's not broken, right? But yeah, I think it's always good to be prepared and open minded to opportunities, and that's what leads to great success. Is just that preparation, open mindedness. I'm curious, with that, exit, and this comes up a lot when we're doing legal office hours. We're talking to the lawyers that oversee a lot of these transactions and, contracts and a lot of, elements that play into due diligence for an exit, acquisition, whatever it is. Did anything, again, catch you off guard, even given the level of experience that you had at that point? Like, were there any little, like, T's that weren't crossed or I's that weren't dotted that you thought were? And you're like, oh, I can't believe we overlooked that.
Um, no, a lot of the executives have done this before. The one thing I would tell you is you see a company like TrueCar and you see the name, and there was many times that we were, there was a couple of pivots in there, again, like I said, the 10-year overnight success. I mean, a lot of these big companies you see now and a lot of these unicorns, but you don't realize, like I was just reading an article on Top Golf. I mean, they almost went bust many times, and now you see them everywhere, and you think, God, those guys are making it. So it's never an easy road. That would be my biggest advice. It's never an easy road. Um, what I see with companies around the small, the mid size that are trying to make an exit is, um, get some advice before you go and put yourselves up for sale. Uh, I have a lot of friends that are CFOs, and they go in and try and evaluate the company. And companies, when you're a startup, you don't always think of things like an organizational chart, or an HR handbook or policies and procedures. And if you can get somebody to come in and do that, you're going to be much more valuable. It's kind of like staging a house, right? If you're going to sell your house and the walls need to be painted, or the good realtor will come in and say, hey, for $200, let's paint the walls. I would say, start thinking of that if you're really serious to sell, because I think what happens is a lot of companies, a lot of founders work backwards. They go and get a value, and then they go, oh, and the value is not where they think it should be, because, as you said, Gary, it's your baby, and you're in love, and you're thinking it's worth 30 million, and someone says that's only worth 20 million. Um, I would say go and get some. There's a lot of great consultants out there that will tell you, what you need to do, and you don't. It's not going to take days, weeks, months, but it could earn you a lot more money when you go to sell. Again, I one of my friends is CFO. He went into a company that was worth 25 million bucks. They didn't even have an organizational chart. 25 million, and they didn't know who reported to who. And so those are the kind of things that you can get prepared for when you're ready to sell. So
Yeah, and it also touches again on topics that we were talking about earlier in regards to just you can't be too heavy with documentation, right?
yeah,
Because if you're doing this along the way, even if it's just a little bit every week, by the point that you're a big organization with even like a valuation that's coming in 10 million under what you expected,
yeah,
you should have a substantial team, a substantial amount of resources to leverage. And along that way, if you're doing basic maintenance of your company, much like a house or a building that you're trying to sell that
yeah,
needs the paint like redone, well, if it's just part of common maintenance at all times that you're aware of these things, you're taking care of these things, then it's not going to surprise, it's not going to hit you when you need it to count, right? And like the other element that comes up a lot during the legal office hours is the amount of money and time that you save by continuously doing these maintenance tasks,
yeah,
right? Because if you're doing it all at the same time with these consultants to play catch up on all this stuff, well, you're going to be racking up a huge bill, and then that's going to affect your cash flow all of a sudden, right?
yeah.
So yeah, it's just again really really wonderful insights and things to call attention to for the community. Yeah.
Good.
So yeah. All right. Let me check chats. See what's going on. If there's more questions, again, reminder: feel free to use the text chat to direct any comments, any questions to Brett. I will pass them along. Yeah, this has been really great. We're coming up on time. We got 7 minutes left. So, any final questions? Get them in now. So Brett has enough time to give you a wonderful answer. Um, or something that came up in the middle of this. Hang on. I was trying to remember something. If it comes to my mind before time's up, we'll bring it up. But in the meantime, Brett, what are at the early stage and the late stage? What are two
Yeah.
common problems you see a business face, and how would you advise addressing that?
Yeah, I would say the most common is having the process and procedures and documenting. I will tell you something, that's lived with me for a long time. When we were opening an office a day in enterprise worldwide, I remember the CEO being interviewed, and they said, well, why are you growing? And he said, one word is discipline. Having that discipline, and the companies that I've seen that have grown tremendously have had that discipline, you know, to um, to keep everything the same. But discipline is a big word, and accountability are big words in any business. It's fun when you're doing a startup, and everybody's, you're bringing in lunch and all that, and everybody's kind of working, but having that, you can't put that accountability and that discipline in too soon.
No, yeah, I love it, and yeah, it's just going back to the theme. Going back to the theme.
Yeah.
Last call for questions. Now's the time. Making sure everyone has an opportunity.
Sure.
Brett, do you have anything coming up in the community, you're a part of a lot of interesting, fun community organizations I'm aware of. I've been able to speak at Provisors myself. That's how we met, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there anything that you want to share with the community that they should be aware of that's going on in the Los Angeles area, greater Los Angeles area? Yeah, I'd love to hear like any suggestions or any
Yeah.
suggestions for organizations that people should be aware of
Sure.
that they can get involved
Sure.
in.
Yeah. I would say, really more overall, I'm a big proponent of networking. There's a great book, Never Eat Lunch Alone.
Hmm.
If you can get out there, Provisors is great, ACG is great. Accelerators, any place where you can go and network, it really helps. It really it broadens not just your company, but broadens you as a person, and it's beneficial. And there's meetups, and once you start in these, then you get all kinds of invites. But I um, I was every time on these websites they say networking is how to get a job, and most of the time people wait until they lose their job to start networking. You should always be networking. Going out to lunch with people within your own company. I'm always telling my kids, take the CFO out to lunch, or it's really important for everything is to go out there. You're going to parties and also joining charities. People love to see that. If you're raising money, if you're giving back to the community, that is a big plus.
Yeah, and like a lot of what you're saying too is about being intentional and strategic in how you're building relationships in your community. I mean, there's an element of it where you want to endear yourself to others by demonstrating that you are an active contributing member of the community that
Yep.
you live or work within. But the other thing too is you only have so much time and energy to spare with so much going on as a business operator owner, but also personal life. There's a lot of stuff going on in people's personal lives, and again, it's important to strive for that balance. So you want to be strategic and intentional with your actions. So, like, yeah, volunteering at charities, especially if you're going to be fundraising, it's a brilliant strategy because you're getting introduced to people with a lot of wealth, donors, right? And they get to see you being a part of your community and, again, build a relationship, an authentic one with you. And,
Yep.
picking these other organizations and asking people to grab coffee, go to lunch, like these types of things are so important. But I want to, like, hear your thoughts on this too, your own experience. Like, how much more effective is it to reach out to these people as mentors without asking them to be your mentor, just simply
Yep.
like you know connecting with them and be like, hey, I really admire you on this, I'd love to like run this by you, hear your thoughts on this, versus just pitching them, whether that's pitching them to be your investor or advisor or something else, which the difference between like this mentor mentee educational relationship versus a
Right.
transactional one. Like, love to hear your stories, thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'll tell you real quick. Some of the best salespeople I've ever met are not salespeople, right? They are just passionate. They're going out and they're telling their story. And I would just tell people, yeah, if you're out at a cocktail party and you're pitching the startup, it's tough. Most people want to help you. They want to help you. But if you're pitching that I need money, they might not be able to help you just with money. It might be, hey, I know a friend of a friend who can help you. So just have a great story. Just be yourself, and tell people what you're passionate about. But yeah, if you come across too salesish, especially when networking for a job, hey, I'm looking for a job. Who do you know at Disney? Well, wait a sec, I just met you. So people want to send business to you, and they want to help you, but they need to trust you first. Trust is a big thing.
Yeah, again, going back to a common theme that we started with, building trust.
Yeah,
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 I get that all the time. Like, hey, can you make a warm intro? And I'm like, this is the first time I've ever interacted with you. You want me
yeah,
to put my reputation on the line introducing a stranger to this person just so you can pitch them? Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's about having like an awareness to the logical steps to a relationship and, building that trust and making sure that person doesn't feel like they're putting themselves at risk on your
Yeah.
behalf. Yeah. So super,
I-
super
I'll tell you
important.
a quick funny story that you'll appreciate since we both went to the same high school. I went to my 20th annual 20th reunion, and you hadn't seen people in 20 years, and there was somebody I went to school with, and he sold life insurance. Next thing I know, he's cornered me in the corner saying, "Who do you have life insurance with, and who is it?" And I could do it better. And I was like, I hadn't seen you in 20 years, so yeah, be very very cautious of that. So
Self-awareness. Don't,
yeah,
yeah. It goes back to another theme that we try to like really hone in on. Don't be in a rush. Just don't be in a
yeah,
rush. Just,
exactly.
yeah, take it easy. My friends recently got me watching Shorzy. Have you watched Shorzy yet?
No, I heard about it.
Okay, good. Yeah, all right. So yeah, I finally put it at the top of my like to-do list, my watch list, and I
Yeah,
went into it. I ended up binging like 7 episodes like over the weekend, and yeah, it's really good. And there's this one character who's constantly like, calm down, just calm down,
yeah,
to like all the other characters. And yeah, that's like a theme here. Just calm down, go at your own
yeah,
pace, take it easy, focus on building those relationships authentically. Again, be
yeah,
strategic and intentional. So I love like hearing your stories and experiences, and again these insights, expertise from you, and it's been wonderful. We're up at time,
yeah,
so yeah, I want to deeply thank you for being a part of this and sharing and helping us get the community going. And yeah, thanks for everyone tuning in on Twitch, on LinkedIn. It's been wonderful knowing that we've been able to help and share with you.
yeah.
Brett, if you got any last minute things you want to say, now's the time.
Just be passionate. Be passionate in anything you do. It rubs off, and people love passion. Whether it's a charity or your startup or your hockey team, be passionate, and it will come back to you.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, seeing your passion for helping the community is infectious. So thank you. All right,
Yeah.
with that, gonna close it down. Thank you everyone for being
All
part of
right.
this. Thank you, Brett. I'll bug you more, and let me
All
know
right.
when you need a goalie. I'll be ready.
Anytime, Jerry. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.